Bella Vista Community Television presents Let's Talk About It. Our hosts today are J.B. Portillo and Kristy Snyder, and we will be talking about how the city and the POA work together. And now, to the studio for our program.
Hi everybody, it's J.B. Portillo here.
And Kristy Snyder.
Yes, and today we're doing part 2 of helping the community understand the three-legged stool way of governing Bella Vista.
That's right.
Can we do a quick little shot here? I believe you can see 2 of the legs. We talked about the Cooper and the POA last time, and this time we're taking the other 2 legs. So,
That's
Kristy,
right.
would you like to introduce...
Mayor Christie.
Yes.
Kristy
to Kristy.
Kristy to Kristy. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And I'd like to, what do I like to do with you? I tell you, I don't
Hopefully
know.
just introduce.
Don't hit him.
Tom, welcome back. Tom is the COO of the Bella Vista Property Owners Association. And thank you for coming back.
Absolutely.
Yes. So today, let's talk about the differences and the synergy between these 2 groups.
That's right.
Mayor Christie, what's the city all about?
Well, the city is, first of all, very young. It only started January the 1st of 2007. So I'm the second mayor. The first mayor was Frank Anderson, and he ran for 8 years, and I'm finishing up the 7th of my 8 years. It is a government agency, and it relies on tax dollars and grants, both grants from the feds and from the state. And even private individuals do give us grants as well. And we have the infrastructure. So we've got fire, police. I have community development services, which is planning, engineering. I've also got code enforcement in there and the building inspectors. We have a court. We're also responsible for maintaining the streets. And for most of the streets, there are still, believe it or not, some private streets here. We're responsible for the maintenance and operation of the library and the trash service. We don't operate the trash service, but we contract with Republic Services to do so. We don't have any utilities whatsoever, unlike many other cities. So, in a nutshell, that is the city.
Okay. And Tom, what's the POA do?
So the POA is a not-for-profit. We are the second largest property owners association in the United States, and we're kind of like Parks and Rec on steroids. 7 lakes, 7 golf courses, tennis, pickleball,
Restaurants.
couple restaurants.
We like those restaurants.
We like the
Yeah, yeah,
restaurants.
We like the restaurants.
Now, the trails, the POA and the city share responsibly on that. But we're in the fun business. We take care of the parks, the disc golf courses, and so all those things. And then we're also the water utility.
See, that's the anomaly that a lot of people
Yeah.
don't understand. So really, it's an amenity.
You could make that argument, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did that happen that it became an anomaly?
Well, I think that really just goes back in time and the formation of the community, and that it made sense at the time. I would say that we're doing an outstanding job providing a reasonable water services to our property owners.
Okay.
We provide great customer service. We haven't raised our water rates in 10 years. We've passed along a couple fees, there's been a couple tax increases. We've passed those along, but we haven't increased our base rate in 10 years. So we feel very comfortable that we provide a great service to our community.
So what percentage, just the best you can, does the POA, the water furnished by the POA, furnish Bella Vista? Because I know there's some other smaller water facilities going on.
So most of Bella Vista is within the POA,
Okay.
but there are sections that are POA and not city, and there's sections that are city and not POA. So majority of them, every home, every business that is in the POA receives POA water.
Okay. So can somebody speak to, I know there are other, three other or two other?
Yeah, there are three others.
Can you talk to that?
Sure. There's the old Bella Vista water facility, and it's down on 71. And they get their water from Bentonville. I think that's where you get, well, you get some from Two-Ton on the far side too.
Yeah.
And they have roughly 35 to 40 customers, but they are a standalone water facility. Then on the west side, Centerton has a line that comes in, and it actually comes right past the police station that we've been talking about in the bond, and it goes past the street department, then it turns right, and it goes down, and it eventually goes through where Duffers is. That whole shopping complex is on Centerton Water. And then it goes over to fire station number 4. It goes to the Village Bible Church next door, and it stops. So you might ask yourself, how did that ever happen? Well,
Yeah.
it goes back similar to what Tom was saying, back, post-war, where they were setting up the water boundaries, and this was a rural water section number 1. And then as the cities began to grow, they began to give pieces of the system to the various cities. The interesting thing about the Centerton line is that it goes through Gravett, then it goes through us, and then it terminates inside Bella Vista. The other one is a well operation. It's up around Robin Road, and it's off 279. They have a property owners group up there, and they all pay the price of operating the well.
Now that Robin Road, that's not in the city or the POA?
It's in the city, but it's not in the POA.
Okay.
Right. As Tom was mentioning, the city boundaries and the POA boundaries do not align. For example, the POA has a great shooting range. Mm-hmm. That's within the POA, but that is actually, is it in Gravett or is it in the county?
County.
County. And then old Bella Vista down on southern part of 71, where that old Bella Vista water system is located. Most of the property there is not in the POA, but it's in the city. There are exceptions. There are some isolated lots down there that are within the POA.
So it's like patchwork.
It's like patchwork. Yeah, that's true. The other thing to remember is that the water systems are governed by ANRC, which is a state body. Arkansas Natural Resources, something like that. And the law is stated that you cannot have two water systems competing against each other within a district. And that's probably a good thing to do. The difference is when the main water system cannot provide the volume that a special new customer might need, and that was the case with the police station.
Yes.
Okay? By law, we had to have fire suppression. And the main that goes down 279 from Centerton is not big enough. It can provide everyday washing water, but if a fire broke out, it cannot sustain it. So just beyond the border of the street department is where the POA has nice big water mains. And so we had to negotiate with both Cooper and with the POA to actually provide water. So we're going to bring the pipes up and we'll tap in, and then the pipes will become the property of the POA. The water is the property of the POA, and it will provide the water suppression. Hopefully we'll never have to use it. Once a year we have to drain it, and it has to be inspected, and then we'll fill it back up again. So that was an exception granted because there was a legal necessity to put fire suppression, and the water facility that is allocated for that area, Centerton, could not provide the volume.
While we're on water, I know that one of the bridges with that incredibly beautiful bypass going down the hill.
Lancashire?
A lot of the work they're doing there is for water. Are we putting some new water movement pipes and things under that bridge or around that bridge?
Not under the bridge. I think she means behind the old west, Town Center West.
Yeah,
where you get
we
the
had to
main road.
relocate. We had to remove our
Okay.
water line because of the bridge construction that's underway. We had to relocate our water line that was on that bridge and get it off the bridge.
Okay, so wrong bridge.
Yeah. So we've that work has been completed or near. It's 100% complete. Our part of it. We just needed to get that off there.
Okay, but I guess what I was thinking about earlier in the year, there was some work done with the water system on the other side of that bridge. You put in some new facilities or something. Don't worry
Where
about
they
it.
were digging the big ditch,
Yeah.
that was part of the relocating.
Gotcha.
So even though the bridge is further down, they had to start way, on the golf course side and dig that big ditch,
Okay.
so forth. They had the track in there for a while.
Okay, so while we're on utilities, sewer versus septic.
Sewer is private. It's the it's village wastewater. The sewer system was originally put in place by Cooper many years ago, and was designed for the townhouses. They decided to get out of the business. Townhouses took it over. They quickly decided that they didn't want to be in the business, and so it was taken over by a private group of individuals. And there's a lot of sewer on the east side. All the businesses, including those along 279, are all on sewer, but they cannot get into the Highlands. It's too far. And they would have to build a whole new facility in order to service the Highlands. It's something I'm very keen on happening. In fact, we have an ordinance on the book that says if you're on septic and you want to sell your home and there is now a sewer line going in front of your home, you must connect to the sewer line before you're allowed to sell your house. Tom and I have talked about septic tanks many times. Our worst dream is that every septic tank around every lake fails on the same day.
Oh, wow.
no.
And you don't want to go there. And, hence the discussion that we're having on the regulations that are going to be required for Airbnb, because they're overloading the septic systems.
And then on the POA side, what we're trying to do is we cooperate with property owners that have had failed systems.
Yes.
So they're in the home for 10, 20, 30 years. The system starts to fail. Possibly they don't have enough space on their own lot. Maybe it's too small, or the conditions won't allow it to perk. In the vast majority of cases, there is common property that they are close to in some cases. And then so the POA in selected situations has allowed those people to either run a line from one lot to another lot. We've had that where a person has purchased a separate lot just down the way and they run a line, or they've gone onto actually POA property, common property, and set up a new leach field.
But that's the exception to the rule.
That's the exception.
Yeah.
We're doing it on fixes, not on new.
Gotcha.
That was something that was brought up and discussed by council just recently. In fact, we had 10 months of discussing it. The new homes that are being built, we found that some of the builders were actually submitting plans for 4 bedrooms, but if you look at the perk test, it said you could only have a 2-bedroom.
Right.
And so then they would come in and change the plans and say, well, okay, well, this is now going to be a den and this is going to be an exercise thing, whatever.
Just by crossing it out and
Right.
saying,
Right.
And the building code, the International Building Code said that's sufficient. Well, we didn't quite agree. And so now we have regulations in place to try and stop it. Because what was happening was some of the builders, in fact, I saw one example where the builder was advertising the home as a 4-bedroom, and then in wee little print underneath it said, this is a 2-bedroom septic system. So that, I think we've plugged. The one that thankfully Tom and his team are addressing is very serious as well. So you get, Peter Christie wants to buy your land and your house and the existing septic system. There's just you and your husband living there. You may or may not remember that it's a 2-bedroom because there's only been the 2 of you and you have the occasional guest come in. I'm bringing in a family of 4, and I have to rely on the realtor to actually look at the original plat to tell me if everything's okay. And unfortunately, we're finding that's not happening.
Right.
I have a neighbor up the street from me who is in that very boat, and they're looking at a bill of about $25,000 to correct it. And so we'll probably have another long discussion on how we can fix that as well. I will give full credit to the building industry and to the realtors and to the health department. They helped us a lot in crafting that new ordinance for the new builds. Now I think it's time for us to do the same thing for the existing homes.
One more thing about utilities before we move on. I know it's totally private, but Carroll Electric services all of Bella Vista?
Yes,
Okay, and that's private.
that's private.
Okay, so one of our next shows, Christy,
Right.
I think we need to have Carroll Electric maybe and the wastewater folks to speak.
Right.
Yeah,
There's
at
a lot
some
of
point.
concern about Carroll Electric right now.
Yeah, they got their original easements from Cooper Communities decades ago. And so we were not in a position where, when we became a city, to say, oh, I'm sorry, those easements aren't any good, or rights of way. We had to absorb them. They're not even all over. They're 7 feet, they're 15 feet. So there's no...
People need to understand that
Yeah.
that there's that point that you just made right there, because everybody thinks it's standard, and
That's right.
and it's not.
Everybody who calls me or contacts me, I say, look, you have to understand it's not standard.
And you get some of those calls too, don't you, buddy?
We get a lot of those calls. They always assume it's the POA cutting down the trees.
I know.
And it's not.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So the way the law is, if it is in their easement or right-of-way, they are within their rights to take the tree down. Now, they do have arborists that will work with the community.
Do you see that happening though?
Yes, I've seen
Yes,
it happen.
I've seen
Okay.
it.
Yep,
Yes.
I've seen it happen. And they can come to a resolution. Now, if everybody's like this,
Right.
there's going to be no resolution, but they still have a responsibility to all of us to provide electricity. So case in point, you may remember August the 26th in 2019, we had a straight line windstorm come through where the winds were in excess of 65 miles an hour. Took out 700 trees, 400 on the trails that Tom and I had to pay the cleanup on, and there were 300 that came down on the streets entangled with live wires.
Yes.
And a lot of people lost power for a long time, and many people couldn't get out of their cul-de-sac because of the live wires. So we had a plan in place with Carroll, and it took a while, but we would do a leapfrog. Carroll would start and turn off everything, get the wires out, and then our streets crew would come in and clean it up. And then we carted everything. We went to every single street and said, put out your stuff, and we took it off and we got it ground up, and Tom had a grinding service as well. I like electricity.
Yeah.
And I like warmth, and I like AC, and 3 times in my life I've had to throw out freezers full of thawed meat and vegetables. I don't want to do that.
I understand.
So we had a high windstorm just recently. A little bit of power was lost, but it was restored within half an hour. That's fine with me. I don't want long outages anymore.
Well, and the trees that were destroyed, yes, that's a little bit on the sad part. However, people were all worried, like, oh, it's just going to look like the moon or something, it's going to look horrible. And look, you can't even really tell. The trees have come back up.
Yes, if you
I
go
think
back
they
to the
did a
ones that
good
cut the
job.
year before,
Yeah.
Right.
it's fine.
Yeah.
Mother
Right.
Nature
Yeah.
does a wonderful thing.
They do. Speaking of Mother Nature, Tom, sometimes I've seen lately, especially during this storm, or I've heard people say if a tree falls.
Does anybody hear it?
Does anybody hear it? Yeah, I think they do actually, and they probably pick up the phone and call probably you. But if it falls on POA common property, is that the responsibility of the POA? How does that work?
So if the tree is, if you're talking about just on common property alone,
Or it might touch on somebody's yard.
typically it's viewed as an act of God. As long as the tree, you can also look at a negligence point of view. So if a property owner comes to the POA and says, okay, there's a tree on common property and it's leaning in such a way that I am very concerned that it's going to hit my house. We'll send out one of our guys who's been doing this for many, many years, and they'll say, okay, if the tree's healthy, chances are we're going to leave it. If it's unhealthy, we'll take it down. If we aren't notified, we have 36,000 36,000 acres. We can't possibly know the condition of every tree.
Right.
And if a tree looks healthy but it's diseased and so on, then that falls into the act of God, where trees fall down. Now, when it comes to common property, we get frequent calls where people will say, a tree fell on common property, we want you to remove it. And we don't do that. We don't get into manicuring the forest. That is not what happens naturally. If a tree falls, it stays. With 36,000 acres, we can't possibly do that.
Well, and in many cases, as a master naturalist, I'm okay with that as long as it's not, just awful looking, because it does take care of wildlife, and it does go back to compost, and you're right, Mother Nature takes over. However, what happens if a tree falls on the city road?
Oh, then we clear it.
Okay.
We clear it right back to where the easement starts.
Okay.
And then if the homeowner is still stuck with this big log and wants to get rid of it, then we'll try and help them by removing it. Where we run into some interesting situations is there was a lot owned by somebody, no house on it, and there's a tree hanging over a lot where there's a house. So we will send an arborist out that we have on staff, similar to what Tom does, and he'll have a look at it. And if it's determined that, it could be a problem, then we'll take it down to the property line. Because by law, I cannot go on somebody's property uninvited and do any kind of work on that property at all.
Right.
And my compliments to the city. Just a couple months ago, I was driving into work and a tree had clearly just fallen, and I had to kind of go around it and go drive over some stuff. And then I had a follow-up appointment, and I was back within, I was like half hour, 45 minutes later, the city crew was leaving. They had already taken care of it, so it was very impressive.
So how do I know if I call the POA or the city?
Oh, so if it's
question.
close to a road and it's not even, but a rule of thumb, if it's in the 10-foot strip, if you go lineal 10 feet out from the actual edge of the road and the tree is in there, it's us. And so you call us.
Okay.
Okay?
But just keep in mind, the city and the POA, and to the ACC to a certain extent, we work very well together. Our member services receives approximately 40,000 calls per year, and half of those calls don't have anything to do with the POA. So we, and the same with the city. The city,
Same with us.
city receives a lot of calls that have nothing to do with the city. They have to do with the wastewater or the POA and so forth. So we work very well together in making sure that we get that property owner in the right direction.
So what about 911? What if somebody just calls 911 and says there's a tree down?
And that's fine, then they'll call. I should actually back up a bit. When you call 911, it doesn't come into our dispatch center. I wish it did. It goes into CINCOM, which is operated in the basement of the county building. and they'll say, what city are you calling from? And if you say Bella Vista, they transfer it immediately in the fraction of a second. Then you're into our dispatch,
Okay.
and they will call streets and send them out.
Okay.
Okay, in the essence of time, Tom, can you tell us, we know how the city is funded,
Yes.
and if you don't know, watch the mayor's rap that we just did, because we'll say it again.
Yeah.
But Tom, seriously, let's talk about how's the POA funded? How do we get our money there?
So I kind of just break it into thirds. A third of our total revenue is water. Talked about that. A third of our revenue is assessments, and a third of our revenue is usage fees. So you go play golf, you have a golf membership, you go play tennis, you go eat at one of our restaurants. Those are that's revenue that's generated. It's not exactly one third, but for simplicity purposes.
Gotcha.
So that's always keep in mind that the POA is a hybrid between a city and a private entity. So a private entity, their goal is to make money. A city will, in most cases, will have a park, and there's no expectation of making money at a park, of course. We're kind of right in the middle. So we provide these amenities, but in many cases, these amenities are subsidized. We would not have 7 golf courses if we did not have the subsidy from assessments.
Right.
We wouldn't have, as many restaurants, as many this, that, all those things. Definitely pools. Pools are very expensive to run. Chemicals are very expensive.
And the liability too.
Yeah, all those things.
Right.
But they're subsidized through the assessment. So when you pay your $37, a little bit goes here, a little bit goes here, and that brings together all those, allows us to provide all those services.
I have to compliment both of you on your websites and the fact that they talk about each other on your websites. I went out to the cities this morning to try to find some things, and it was pretty easy. A lot of people are a little hesitant to go to websites, but I encourage you, Bella Vista, to go out to not only the city's website, but the POA. There's all kinds of stuff there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's only going to get better when we get this new system in it's just going to be amazing what we can do there. And even the ACC has a website. So it's so confusing to folks as to where do I go for what. Now, if we could, permit-wise, you don't do anything with permits.
We do a little bit here and there, but not much. It's really the ACC and the city that do the permits.
That's right.
And there's a very good explanation, for sure, on the POA website that says, do I need a permit?
Correct.
Yeah, and it pretty much, I know you can't see this, but it's out there on the POA website and probably on the other. I know that you all tweet as well. There's all kinds of things you can sign up to get tweets and that sort of thing. You have a great, this is put out by the POA, and there's a whole section in here on the city. So come on, folks, it's all kind of right here. And I'm saying this as nicely as I can. You can't lead a horse. You can lead a horse to water,
Right.
but you can't make them read
Yeah.
or drink or anything else.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons we're doing this
Yeah.
is to try to help folks and to know that all 3 of these organizations, but especially these 2, work together. Like, y'all talk daily, weekly.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
But what you're saying, the POA will send out, in a month's period, we'll send out 30 email, e-newsletters, e-blasts, and so forth, to as many as 30 to 40,000 of our property owners. Sometimes that's multiple emails and so forth. The good news is that 40% of those are open, which is much higher than the industry standard. The bad news is that 60% are not open. And so then we have a property owner come in and say, well, why didn't you tell us that
Right.
the pool was closed?
Right.
Or the golf course was closed. Well, we put it in the newsletter, the e-newsletter, and it said that we are closing for maintenance or what have you. So the good news is the 40% But the bad news is the 60%
I have
that are not
to
opening.
piggyback on that. I actually rent, and I feel like as a renter in Bella Vista, I am completely cut off from everything. It's because I'm a civic oriented, and I'm actually the one who takes action when I want to know something that I'm sitting here, that's a prime example. But as a renter, I just feel that I'm speaking for all renters in Bella Vista, and I actually signed a 3-year lease. So it's not like I'm going anywhere.
Right.
And I feel like maybe there needs to be more focus on the renters in Bella Vista versus property owners, because we have value as well.
Absolutely.
And having said that, I can't get a membership card.
No, you can't. So there was a court case back in, I think, the 90s. I could be wrong on this. And the courts determined that the usage of facilities, that enjoyment, the use and enjoyment of the amenities is not a transferable right.
Even though I pay for it in my rent.
It's not transferable. Now, what you can do is you can get a guest pass.
Which really doesn't translate to anything, to be honest with you.
Correct, but you can get a guest pass and you can pay the usage fee, so you can go to the gym facility. But the focal point that we're trying to do is we're focusing on the membership. And I understand your point of view, but the courts dictated that you can't your renter, your lessor, your landlord can't transfer that right.
Even though he charges me for what he has to pay, I pay for it anyway through the rent, but I can't actually use it.
He's still the owner.
Yeah.
Do you want me to adopt you? And
You keep saying that. You keep disappointing me. And Christmas is coming up. I
No,
mean,
in all seriousness, I hear you, and I
Yeah.
know the rules,
Yeah.
but I also hear her.
yeah.
And I know sometimes, rules are not made until there's a need. And sometimes when things are abused, I'm just saying that maybe in the past some of the renters were not as good and they didn't take care of things and they didn't do what they do. You've got some good ones out there too. So I'm just
I agree.
hoping that somehow, some way, as something we do in future, if we can't figure out a way
I don't know.
to, anyway.
Well, I do know someone that's on the Rules and Regulations Committee for the POA.
And we're having a meeting January the 13th.
I'll be there.
In all seriousness, no, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Let's talk, and we're kind of getting close to the end here because I know Mayor Christie has a meeting to go to, but let's just talk briefly about the difference between the two attorneys. We have an attorney and you have a city attorney, and do they work together? Do they talk?
Oh, yeah, they talk all the time.
Yeah. So is there, Doug takes care of, he's an employee.
So Doug McCash is the general counsel for the POA, and he takes care of all of our legal needs. And we still use specialists at times. We go out. But there's definite issues where Doug and Jason communicate on issues. For example, the trails. That's a great one where it's a joint agreement between the city, the POA, and the Trailblazers. And that document was crafted jointly between the two entities. Even though three signed it, it was really the city and the POA that actually physically wrote it. So yeah, we have multiple, we're all in the same sandbox together, and we work together for the right reason, but we have to work together.
Of course you do. I mean, for the good of all of us.
Yeah.
For the betterment of our property owners, for our members, we all work together, because there is, I mean, when the mayor was talking about this how specific location of the water, that's so specific, how is an average resident supposed to know that level of detail? But we do.
Right.
And we work together to say, okay, unfortunately you have to make a second call and you have to call the city, but this is who you want to talk to. I received an email, a property owner sent in an idea. It was not a city issue. This was just 2 days ago. And I copied Emily, who works for the city. I copied and I transferred it over, and those two are now talking about this issue. So that happens every single day.
Yes, yes.
You know, we both have HR departments and they talk. We both have communication folks and they talk. Tom has a recreation, I guess she's a director. Yep. And I've got a trails person.
New trails person.
A new trails person. And it's just constant. We don't just say, oh, it's Tuesday, okay, we have to call the POA.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we're talking all the time. And our attorney, Jason Kelly, is a staff attorney, not a city attorney. A city attorney is an elected position.
Okay.
Okay, so he's staff, he's a paid employee, and he's also our prosecuting attorney in the court.
Well, I got to tell you guys, having you on the show now for quite a few sessions, this is complicated. Bella Vista is complicated. I mean, hands down, it's complicated, and you guys nailed it. But there must have been a huge learning curve for you. It is the most complicated community.
I remember my first few months, I was always calling Carmen Dissing at Member Services and going, where does this fall? You know, but we work well together. I mean,
Right.
I'm meeting with a couple of the city guys today. We're working on a new project. We're not going public on this because the idea came up a week ago, and we wanted to involve the city very early on to make sure, hey, are we doing all the right stuff? Because we follow the rules just like anybody else does.
Yes. Okay, so we talk, in closing, let's talk a little bit about how everybody's handling growth. How are you guys handling the growth? Because it's there.
Well, there's definitely a huge increase in the number of improved properties. When I got here, it was a couple thousand less than it is now, that's for sure. And, you know, for example, we're talking about the possible enlargement or reconfiguration of Reardon Hall because we need to address the growth. Branchwood is, you know, we're developing a 5-year plan, and we're going to probably have to expand Branchwood at some point in the near future because of the utilization. We're talking about how do we expand the Metfield Fitness Center. So all these things, when we get such an increase in residents and members, and they want to use the fitness facilities, they want to go to the restaurants, they want to do this, or they want to do that, you know, we have to adjust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And your mantra is you manage the growth doesn't manage you.
Correct.
So I think you both
And
do a
we've
great
had that
job
for
at that.
years.
Yes.
And so we've been growing our infrastructure more and more as the growth of homes. It's a good news, bad news story. The growth of new developed homes is great for the POA. On our side, it increases the cost because now I need so many more firemen, so many more policemen, so many guys on the street department.
infrastructure.
Because everything goes up.
Yeah.
Right.
We're ready for it.
In closing, let's just remind everybody that for new residents, you guys do at least a quarterly.
We're doing
Yeah,
one
we got
this
one coming up.
Saturday.
You're doing a Saturday one. Okay. Is it only for new residents?
No, anybody can go.
Anybody can go. And you guys talk about these sort of, that's yet another way
it
that
at?
we try to communicate.
It'll be held at the country club?
Country Club.
Country Club, 10
It's-
o'clock this Saturday.
It's very interesting.
Yes, it is.
To go talk about that.
And it's fun.
It is.
You get to meet new people.
Christy, any closing remarks?
No, I'm just really appreciative that you guys are taking the effort to explain all of this because it's challenging for anybody to understand the three-legged stool.
It is.
It really is.
Next month, we plan on having, I've already talked to the chair of the Planning Commission, so he will be here to talk about that, and I was hoping maybe we could get Doug from the CDC
Sure.
to see how all of that works, and we'll just keep repeating these things if we need to.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for the initiative.
Yes, and both of you, any of you, please feel free to use these. We're doing these for you too.
Yeah.
So use them
Absolutely.
any way you want to.
Great.
Except to like throw tomatoes or something. Don't do that. Just for good. Okay.
Well, we do that off camera.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Kristy, I think we've done it again. What
I
do you
think so.
Yeah?
You, both of you have a happy holiday.
Yes.
And to you, thank you.
Yeah. Next time.
Remember, you can see this program on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at various times. You may also view this program on YouTube.com by going to Bella Vista TV. This has been a presentation of Bella Vista Community Television.